The locomotive's whistle pierced the Montana air as it rolled to a stop at Sagebrush Crossing, black smoke billowing into the vast sky. Steam hissed from the engine, mixing with the red dust that seemed to coat everything in this frontier town. Eliza Hartman pressed her gloved hands against her stomach, trying to calm the churning within. Through the veil that covered her face, she could see curious townsfolk gathering on the platform, their eyes already searching for newcomers. She had traveled for nearly 2 weeks from Philadelphia, her trunk containing everything she owned in this world. The wedding dress she wore had belonged to her mother, its once pristine ivory now yellowed with age and dulled by the journey's dust. The heavy fabric hung on her smaller frame, making her appear even more fragile than she felt. "End of the line, Miss," the conductor called out, his weathered face showing a mixture of pity and curiosity as he glanced at her bridal attire. Sagebrush Crossing. Eliza gathered her courage and rose from her seat. The other passengers had already disembarked, leaving her alone in the car with her fears. She touched the thick veil that concealed her face, ensuring it was secure. Beneath it, hidden from the world, the port wine stain spread across her left cheek like spilled ink on parchment, reaching from her temple to the corner of her mouth. Her family had kept her hidden away because of it, until they found a solution, a mail-order marriage to a prosperous merchant in the territories who had never seen her face. The platform boards creaked under her boots as she stepped down, her trunk thudding heavily beside her. The crowd's murmuring grew louder, and she caught fragments of their speculation. Must be Rusk's bride. All the way from back east. Why is she wearing that heavy veil in this heat? Abel Rusk. She had memorized his letters, each one painting a picture of a successful man building his fortune in dry goods and cattle. He had requested a wife of good breeding and education, someone who could bring refinement to his growing status in the community. Her father had been eager to accept the arrangement, along with a modest bride price that would help settle his debts. Miss Hartman. She turned toward the voice. A tall man in a fine black suit stood before her, his appearance matching the photograph he had sent. Abel Rusk was handsome in the way that prosperity could make a man. Well-fed, well-groomed, with gold glinting from his watch chain and cufflinks. His dark hair was pomaded back, and his mustache was waxed to sharp points. "Mr. Rusk," she managed, her voice barely audible through the veil. He circled her slowly, like a rancher appraising livestock. The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama. Eliza noticed other figures among them, weathered ranchers in worn dungarees, women in calico dresses faded from sun and washing, children peering between their parents' legs. One man stood apart from the others, leaning against a post near the freight office. Unlike the curious crowd, he seemed uninterested in the spectacle, his attention focused on adjusting the leather of a bridle in his hands. "You're smaller than I expected," Abel announced, loud enough for others to hear. "But I suppose that can't be helped. Come, let me see my bride properly." Eliza's hands trembled as she slowly lifted the veil. She had practiced this moment during the long journey, telling herself that her new husband would see past the mark, that he would value her education, her gentle manner, her skill with needlework and household management. The transformation in Abel's face was immediate and terrible. His satisfied smile froze, then twisted into something between shock and rage. The crowd gasped collectively, some stepping back, others craning their necks for a better view. "What is this?" Abel's voice rose to nearly a shout. "What kind of deception?" He stepped back as if she had struck him. "Your father sent me a ruined woman, a marked creature." Tears burned behind Eliza's eyes, but she would not let them fall. Not here, not before all these strangers. She had known this might happen, had tried to prepare herself, but the public humiliation cut deeper than she had imagined. "The arrangement is off," Abel declared, turning to address the crowd as much as her. "I contracted for a proper wife, not this. I won't be made a fool of." "Mr. Rusk," Eliza found her voice, though it shook. "Please, If we could speak privately. There's nothing to speak about. He straightened his jacket with sharp, angry movements. You can find your own way back to wherever you came from. I won't have you in my house or bearing my name. The crowd parted as he strode away, leaving Eliza standing alone with her trunk on the platform. Some of the onlookers drifted away, embarrassed by the scene. Others lingered, whispering among themselves. A few young men laughed openly, making crude jokes. One spat tobacco juice near her feet. Marked by the devil himself, an old woman muttered, crossing herself. Rusk's got standards, at least, another voice added. Eliza pulled the veil back down with shaking fingers. She had no money for return passage. Her father had made it clear that she was not welcome back home. She was alone in a frontier town with nothing but her trunk and a wedding dress that now felt like mockery. The sun beat down mercilessly as the crowd finally dispersed. Returning to their business, Eliza dragged her trunk to a bench near the station house and sat, trying to think through her panic. The station master avoided her eyes as he went about his duties. Even the stray dogs that wandered the platform gave her a wide berth. As the afternoon stretched on, her throat grew parched and her dress became a prison of heavy fabric and whalebone stays. She had noticed a water pump near the freight office, but approaching it would mean walking past the men who still loitered there, smoking and talking. Their occasional glances in her direction made their topic of conversation clear. It was then that the man who had been working on the bridle finally looked up. He was perhaps 35, with sun-weathered skin and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. His clothes were clean but simple canvas pants, a cotton shirt rolled to the elbows, and boots that had seen many miles. Unlike the others, his expression held neither pity nor mockery, just a quiet assessment. He walked to the pump, filled a tin cup with water, and approached her. Without a word, he set the cup on the bench beside her and returned to his work. It was a simple gesture, but after hours of cruel exposure, the unexpected kindness nearly undid her composure. As dusk began to paint the sky in shades of rose and purple, Eliza knew she had to find shelter. The respectable hotel would never accept her now. Word of her rejection had surely spread through the entire town. She stood on unsteady legs, preparing to drag her trunk toward the edge of town where she might find a barn or shed to shelter in. You need a place for the night. The quiet voice belonged to the man with the bridle. He stood a respectful distance away, his gray eyes steady on hers. I have a cabin south of town. He continued, It's quiet, clean. You'd be safe there. Eliza studied him through her veil. He didn't look away from her covered face, nor did he show the nervous energy of a man with improper intentions. There was something solid about him, like the mountains that ringed the valley. I don't even know your name, she said. Jonah Creed. I run horses out at Coyote Creek Ranch. And you make a habit of offering shelter to abandoned women. A slight smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. No, ma'am, but I don't make a habit of watching people suffer when I can help either. She had no better options. Night was falling, and she could already feel the temperature dropping. I can pay you when I find work. We'll sort that out later. He hefted her trunk easily and started toward a wagon hitched nearby. Can you manage the ride? It's about 3 miles. Eliza followed him, aware of the eyes watching from windows and doorways. As they left Sagebrush Crossing behind, she wondered if she was making another mistake, trusting this stranger. But something in his quiet manner, the way he hadn't flinched from her unveiled face, gave her a fragile hope. The wedding dress that had carried her dreams across half a continent now felt like all that remained of the woman she had thought she would become. As the wagon rolled through the gathering darkness toward an uncertain future, Eliza Hartman realized that her true journey was only just beginning. The next morning dawned cold and clear, with frost glittering on the grass outside Jonah's cabin. Eliza woke disoriented, still wearing her travel clothes, having fallen asleep in the small bedroom he had offered her. The events of yesterday crashed back Abel's rejection, the humiliation, the unexpected kindness of a stranger. She found Jonah already working in the corral, breaking ice from the water troughs. He glanced up at her approach but continued his work, giving her space to speak first. Mr. Creed, I need to return to town today. I must find work and—" "You're welcome to stay as long as needed," he interrupted gently. "But if you're set on going back, I'll take you after the morning chores." The ride to Sagebrush Crossing felt different in daylight. Eliza had replaced her wedding dress with a simple gray traveling dress, though she kept her veil firmly in place. As they entered Main Street, she could feel the weight of stares from shopkeepers opening their stores and women sweeping their porches. "Where would you like to start?" Jonah asked. "The general store, perhaps, or the hotel. I can clean, cook, sew." But at each establishment, the result was the same. The moment they recognized her as Rusk's rejected bride, doors closed and opportunities vanished. Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house was particularly cruel. "I run a respectable establishment," she said loudly enough for passers-by to hear. "I can't have someone with your affliction disturbing my guests. It's bad for business, you understand." By midday, they had exhausted every possibility. Even the saloon, typically less particular about their help, turned her away. The owner claimed he had no openings, though Eliza had seen the "Help Wanted" sign in the window. Abel Rusk himself appeared as they stood outside the milliner's shop. He strutted down the boardwalk with two well-dressed companions, speaking loudly about his plans to find a proper bride from Denver instead. "Still here," he called out upon seeing her. "I thought I made myself clear yesterday. Sagebrush Crossing has no place for damaged goods." His companions laughed. One of them, a narrow-faced man with pale eyes, added, "Maybe she's hoping to find some blind fellow who won't know the difference." "Even a blind man has standards," Abel replied, causing another round of laughter. Eliza stood frozen, each word striking like a physical blow. But Jonah stepped forward, positioning himself between her and the men. "That's enough, Rusk." Abel's amusement faded. "This isn't your concern, Creed, unless—" His eyes narrowed. "Don't tell me you've taken pity on this creature, though I suppose a hermit like you can't be too choosy." "I said that's enough." Jonah's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Or what you'll sick one of your wild horses on me." Abel stepped closer. "You forget yourself. Creed, I could buy and sell you 10 times over. I could make sure you never sell another horse in this territory." "You could try." The tension stretched taut between them. Abel's companions shifted nervously, aware that despite Jonah's quiet demeanor, he had the solid build of a man who worked with 1,000-pound animals daily. Finally, Abel stepped back with a dismissive wave. "She's not worth the trouble, but mark my words, anyone who helps her will find themselves on the wrong side of my business dealings. I wonder how long your ranch would last without being able to sell in town. Creed." After they left, Eliza turned to Jonah with tears threatening behind her veil. "You shouldn't have done that. He'll ruin you." "Let him try." Jonah guided her back toward the wagon. "I've dealt with worse than Abel Rusk." "But why? Why risk your livelihood for someone you don't even know?" He was quiet for a long moment as they walked. "My wife died 8 years ago. Fever took her while I was away buying horses. The town doctor wouldn't come out to the ranch, said it was too far for a lost cause. The good Christian women of Sagebrush Crossing wouldn't help either, said she'd brought it on herself, marrying beneath her station, living rough on a ranch." Eliza absorbed this information, understanding dawning. She died alone. Jonah continued, "I won't stand by and watch this town's cruelty claim someone else." They made one more stop, the church at the end of Main Street. Eliza had little hope, but felt compelled to try. Reverend Walsh received them in his study, his thin face arranged in an expression of practiced concern. "Miss Hartman, I heard about yesterday's unfortunate situation." He steepled his fingers. "While the church believes in charity, we must also consider the sensibilities of our congregation. Your presence might be disruptive to worship. "I'm not asking to be a spectacle," Eliza said quietly. "Only for work, or help finding. I'm afraid I can't recommend you to any of our parish families. Your mark, well, in Leviticus it clearly states that those with blemishes cannot approach the altar of God. While we live in more enlightened times, many still hold to the old beliefs about such. Disfigurements being signs of divine displeasure." "That's not what those verses mean," Jonah interjected. "And you know it." The Reverend's face flushed. "Mr. Creed, your own spotty attendance hardly qualifies you to interpret Scripture. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a sermon to prepare." Outside the church, Eliza sank onto the wagon seat, overwhelmed. "It's hopeless. They'll never accept me." "Their loss." Jonah said simply, "The offer stands. You can stay at the ranch as long as you need." "I can't impose on your kindness indefinitely." "Then don't. I need help with the house and the vegetable garden. My cooking could use improvement too. Consider it employment, if that sits better with you." She looked at him through her veil. "Why don't you ask what it is, the mark? Everyone else stares and whispers, but you've never asked." "Does it matter? You're the same person either way." Something in his matter-of-fact acceptance broke through her defenses. "It's a port wine stain. I've had it since birth. My parents tried everything, creams, prayers, even a traveling doctor who claimed he could burn it away. Nothing worked. They kept me inside, away from society, until this arrangement with Abel seemed like their only chance to see me married off." Jonah clicked to the horses, starting them back toward the ranch. "My grandmother had something similar on her neck and shoulder. Never slowed her down any. She used to say God marked the people he wanted to keep special track of." As they left Sagebrush Crossing behind, Eliza noticed faces in windows watching their departure. She could imagine the gossip already spreading, the rejected bride taken in by the hermit rancher. But for the first time since stepping off the train, she felt a small spark of something that might have been hope. "I'm Mr. Creed," she said as they rolled along the rutted road. "If I stay, there will be talk. Abel's threats." "Let them talk. Let Rusk make his threats. I've survived worse storms than his temper tantrums." He glanced at her. "Besides, the ranch could use some proper curtains. The ones I've got are more whole than fabric." Despite everything, Eliza felt her lips curve in the first smile she'd managed since leaving Philadelphia. "Curtains I can manage, though I should warn you, I've been told my cooking is merely adequate." "Then you're already ahead of me. I once served a ranch hand beans that he swore could have been used to mend fences." The sun was setting as they reached the cabin, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Eliza looked back toward town one last time, then forward to the simple dwelling that offered refuge. She had been rejected by the man who promised to marry her, scorned by an entire town, and left with nothing but the clothes in her trunk. But somehow, sitting beside this quiet man who judged her by her character rather than her appearance, she felt more valued than she had in all her years of hiding behind closed doors in Philadelphia. Perhaps this wasn't the ending she had expected, but rather an unexpected beginning. The autumn wind rattled the windows of Jonah's cabin as Eliza sat by the lamp, mending one of his work shirts. She had been at the ranch for 3 weeks now, and a comfortable routine had developed between them. Mornings began with coffee, strong and black for him, sweetened with a precious bit of sugar for her. Then came the chores feeding chickens, gathering eggs, tending the vegetable garden while Jonah worked with the horses. She still wore her veil when she went outside, even here where no one could see her except Jonah and the occasional ranch hand who came to help with the horses. Old habits died hard, and the protection of the fabric had become as much a part of her as the mark it concealed. Storm coming in, Jonah observed from the doorway, watching dark clouds gather over the mountains. Might want to bring in the rest of those tomatoes before they're ruined. Eliza set aside her mending and reached for her shawl. Together they worked in companionable silence, filling baskets with the last of the harvest, When the first fat raindrops began to fall, they hurried inside, laughing as they shook water from their clothes. "I'll make stew with these tonight," Eliza said, surveying their bounty. "Your recipe, not mine. I've finally accepted that frontier cooking requires more salt and pepper than Philadelphia sensibilities would approve." Jonah smiled, a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. She had learned that his smiles were rare but genuine, unlike the practiced expressions she'd known in society. After supper, they sat by the fire as had become their custom. Jonah worked on repairing a bridle while Eliza read aloud from one of the few books in the cabin, a collection of James Fenimore Cooper tales that had belonged to his late wife. "Margaret loved those stories," he said quietly when she paused between chapters. "Used to say she'd married her own frontier hero, though I tried to tell her I was just a man who smelled like horses most days." "What was she like?" Eliza asked carefully. He rarely spoke of his wife, and she had learned not to push. "Spirited, educated, like you. Her father was a banker in Denver, nearly disowned her when she married me." He set down the bridle. "She never complained, though, not about the hard work or the isolation, not even at the end." Eliza wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but held back. Despite their growing ease with each other, there remained boundaries neither crossed. He had never asked to see her face without the veil. She had never presumed to offer more than companionship and household help. The next morning brought news from town. Samuel, one of the ranch hands, arrived with supplies and gossip. "That Rusk fellow's been spreading tales," he reported, uncomfortable but feeling Jonah should know. "Says you're keeping a fallen woman out here. Some folks are talking about riding out to run her off." Eliza's hands stilled on the bread she was kneading. Jonah's expression didn't change, but she noticed his jaw tighten. "Let them come," he said evenly. "Any man who sets foot on my land with ill intent will find himself looking down the barrel of my Winchester." "Just thought you should know," Samuel mumbled. "For what it's worth, not everyone believes Rusk's poison. Mrs. Chen at the laundry said any woman who could get under his skin that bad must have some backbone." After Samuel left, Eliza couldn't concentrate on her tasks. The thought of bringing violence to Jonah's doorstep made her stomach churn. "I should leave," she said finally. "I've brought you nothing but trouble." Jonah looked up from the ledger where he tracked horse sales. "Is that what you want?" "What I want doesn't matter. I won't have you hurt because of me." He stood and crossed to where she stood by the window. "Eliza." It was only the second time he'd used her given name. "What you want is the only thing that matters. This is your home as long as you choose it to be." "But the threats." "I've faced down horse thieves, claim jumpers, and once a half-mad grizzly. Abel Rusk and his cronies don't worry me." He paused. "Unless you're unhappy here. I know it's not what you expected when you came west." Eliza turned from the window to face him. Even through the veil, she could see the sincerity in his gray eyes. "I expected to be a merchant's wife in town, hosting teas and organizing church socials," she said slowly. "Instead, I'm learning to preserve vegetables and mend fence posts. I wake to roosters instead of church bells. My hands are rougher than they've ever been." Jonah started to speak, perhaps to apologize, but she continued, "And I've never been happier." The admission surprised her with its truth. "For the first time in my life, I'm valued for what I can do, not hidden away for how I look. You treat me as a person, not a problem to be solved or a shame to be concealed." "You are a person," he said simply. "A good one. Anyone who can't see past a mark on your skin is a fool." Thunder rumbled overhead, matching the turmoil in Eliza's chest. "Sometimes I forget I'm wearing the veil here. I'll be working in the garden or cooking, and for hours I don't think about my face at all. That never happened in Philadelphia." "Then take it off." The words hung between them. Eliza's hands moved unconsciously to the fabric. "You don't have to," Jonah added quickly. "But you're safe here. No one will stare or judge. It's just us." With trembling fingers, Eliza unpinned the veil and let it fall. The mark spread across her left cheek in its familiar pattern, deep red against her pale skin. She forced herself to meet Jonah's eyes, braced for the flinch, the look of pity or disgust she knew so well. But Jonah's expression didn't change. He studied her face with the same calm attention he gave to everything else, assessing, understanding, accepting. "You have your mother's eyes," he said finally. "You mentioned that once. Green like spring grass. I can see why she was proud of them." Eliza blinked back tears. "Most people don't notice my eyes." "Most people are fools. Like I said." He turned back to his ledger as if nothing momentous had occurred. "Samuel brought word that the Hendersons' mare is ready to foal. I'll need to ride over tomorrow. Think you'll be all right here alone?" "Yes," she managed, still adjusting to the strange sensation of being unveiled in front of another person. "I'll start on those new curtains you mentioned." The rest of the day passed normally, except for the absence of the veil. Eliza caught herself touching her face several times, expecting to feel fabric. But Jonah treated her exactly as before. No stolen glances, no awkward silences. When he passed her the salt at dinner, when he thanked her for the meal, when he wished her good night, everything remained unchanged. That night, as she lay in the small bedroom listening to rain drum on the roof, Eliza thought about Providence and plans. She had come west to marry Abel Rusk, to hide her shame behind his prosperity and position. Instead, she had found something entirely unexpected, a man who saw her clearly and didn't look away, a life of simple purpose, a home where she could lower her veil without fear. The next morning, she made breakfast with her face bare, humming softly as she worked. When Jonah came in from the early chores, he smiled at the sight. "You look content," he observed. "I am," Eliza replied, surprising herself again with the truth of it. "Though I do worry about you going to the Hendersons alone. What if Rusk's men—" "They won't. Rusk is many things, but he's not stupid enough to ambush me in broad daylight. Too many questions, too many witnesses." He accepted the plate she offered. "Besides, I'll be back by evening. The mare shouldn't have much trouble." As she watched him prepare for the journey, checking his rifle and saddling his horse, Eliza felt a flutter of concern that had nothing to do with Rusk's threats. Somewhere in these weeks of quiet companionship, Jonah had become essential to her days. The thought of harm coming to him was unbearable. "Be careful," she said as he mounted up. He touched the brim of his hat. "Always am. Keep the rifle by the door, just in case, though I doubt you'll need it." She watched him ride away until he disappeared over the rise. Then she turned back to the cabin, their home. She realized, whether by accident or providence, she had found her place in this unlikely refuge. The woman who had arrived in Sagebrush Crossing seeking to hide behind a merchant's respectability had discovered something far more valuable, the freedom to be herself, mark and all, in the company of a man who asked nothing but honesty in return. The first snow of winter dusted the mountains like flour on a baker's table. Eliza stood at the kitchen window, watching Jonah work with a young colt in the corral. 2 months had passed since she'd stopped wearing her veil inside the cabin, though she still covered her face for the occasional trip to town or when ranch hands visited. The morning routine had become sacred to her, coffee brewing while she prepared breakfast, the comfortable silence broken only by necessary words about the day's tasks. Sometimes Jonah would share a memory of Margaret, and Eliza would offer stories of Philadelphia. Gradually, they were building a bridge between their separate pasts. "That colt's going to be magnificent," she said as Jonah entered, stamping snow from his boots. "If he doesn't throw me into next week first." He accepted the coffee gratefully, warming his hands on the cup. Wild as his sire, but twice as stubborn, Eliza had learned to read the subtle signs of his contentment, the relaxed line of his shoulders, the way he lingered over breakfast instead of rushing back to work. This morning, though, she noticed a tension in him. "Something troubling you?" He hesitated. "Samuel brought word yesterday. Rusk's been talking again. Says he's got legal claim to you. Some contract with your father. The familiar knot of fear tightened in her stomach. My father did sign papers. But surely after Abel rejected me, law's murky on such things out here, without proper witnesses to his rejection. Jonah set down his cup. Don't worry about it. Rusk's just rattling sabers. But Eliza could see the concern he tried to hide. That afternoon, while he was out checking fence lines, she made a decision. Taking paper from the small desk where Jonah kept his accounts, she began to write. Dear Father. I write to inform you that I am well and have found employment in Montana. Mr. Rusk declined the marriage arrangement upon seeing my affliction. I hereby release you from any obligation regarding my future, and ask only that you send written confirmation that any contracts between you and Mr. Rusk are null and void. She sealed the letter and set it aside for the next trip to town. Whatever legal games Abel might play, she would not let them touch Jonah or his ranch. That evening brought an unexpected visitor, Dr. Marcus Hoffman, the new physician who'd recently arrived in Sagebrush Crossing, appeared at their door just as the sun was setting. Mr. Creed, I apologize for the intrusion. My horse threw a shoe about a mile back. I was hoping... Come in, Doctor. Jonah stepped aside. We'll see to your horse. Eliza instinctively reached for her veil, but Jonah's slight shake of his head stopped her. She stood frozen as the doctor entered, his eyes widening at the sight of her face. This is Miss Hartman, Jonah said evenly. Eliza, Dr. Hoffman's the one who helped birth the Henderson's foal last month. The doctor's surprise shifted to professional interest. Miss Hartman, forgive my staring. I studied similar birthmarks in medical school in Boston. Fascinating how they form in the womb. Fascinating, Eliza repeated dryly. That's one word for it. I meant no offense. The doctor seemed genuinely contrite. It's just that I've seen new treatments in Europe. Not removal, but ways to lighten the appearance. Though, honestly, he added, accepting the cup of coffee she offered, yours has rather an artistic quality, like a painter's wash of color. Eliza nearly dropped the coffee pot. No one had ever described her mark as anything but a curse or deformity. While Jonah and the doctor tended to the horse, Eliza prepared a simple supper. She found herself oddly at ease as they ate, the doctor regaling them with stories of his journey west and his struggles to establish a practice in a town that preferred folk remedies to modern medicine. They'd rather buy snake oil from traveling salesmen than accept that washing hands prevents infection. He lamented. Present company accepted. Of course, I've heard you run one of the cleanest ranches in the territory. Mr. Creed. Cleanliness is practical. Jonah replied. Sick horses don't sell. As the evening progressed, Eliza found herself joining the conversation more freely. The doctor treated her as he would any woman, his gaze direct but not invasive. When he finally prepared to leave, newly shod horse in tow, he paused at the door. Miss Hartman, I hope this isn't presumptuous, but I'm trying to establish a women's health clinic in town. I could use someone with education and sense to help with organization and basic care. The pay wouldn't be much, but... I'll consider it, Eliza managed, stunned by the offer. After he left, she turned to Jonah. Did you arrange that? No. He seemed as surprised as she was. Though I did mention to him once that you could read and write better than half the town. Must have remembered. But my face doesn't affect your abilities. The doc's practical. He needs help. You need work that uses your mind. Makes sense to me. Eliza sank into a chair by the fire. I don't know if I could, being in town, with everyone staring. You don't have to decide tonight. Jonah took his usual seat across from her. But maybe it's time to stop letting Rusk and his kind dictate what you can and can't do. They sat quietly for a while, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Eliza spoke. When I was 16, My parents hosted a garden party. I begged to attend, just to listen to the music from behind the hedges. My mother agreed, as long as I wore a heavy veil. She stared into the flames. A wind came up and blew it aside just as a group of young men walked past. One of them said I looked like I'd been splashed with wine by a careless god. They all laughed. Boys can be cruel. Yes, but sitting here now, I think perhaps he wasn't entirely wrong. Maybe I was marked by some careless deity. Careless, but not malicious. Because that mark led me here. Jonah leaned forward. Eliza, let me finish. She met his eyes. In Philadelphia, I was a burden, a shameful secret. Here, I've learned I have worth beyond my appearance. I can contribute. Build something. Be useful. That wouldn't have happened if Abel had kept his word. You give this place too much credit. You always had worth. But I didn't know it. She smiled, feeling the truth of her next words. And neither did you. I think, when was the last time before I came that you had someone to share coffee with in the morning to read to you in the evening? Jonah was quiet for a long moment. 8 years, he said finally. 8 years of empty chairs and silent suppers. Then perhaps we've both found something we didn't know we were looking for. The words hung in the air like smoke from the fire. Eliza felt heat rise in her unmarked cheek, wondering if she'd been too forward. But Jonah's expression held something she hadn't seen before. A softness, a vulnerability that made him look younger. Perhaps we have, he agreed quietly. The next morning brought fresh snow and a new understanding between them. Nothing had been declared, no promises made, but something had shifted. When their hands brushed passing dishes at breakfast, neither pulled away. When Jonah returned from his morning chores, he lingered in the doorway, watching her work with an expression that made her heart flutter. I've been thinking about the doctor's offer, Eliza said as they prepared for a trip to town for supplies. I might try it, 1 day a week to start. Good. Jonah's approval warmed her more than the fire. Town needs someone with sense helping the doc, and you need more than just this ranch and my poor company. Your company isn't poor. She adjusted her veil, preparing to face the world. It's the richest I've known. As they drove toward Sagebrush Crossing, Eliza thought about the strange paths life carved through a person's expectations. She had come west as a bride, been rejected and humiliated, found refuge with a grieving widower, and somehow discovered a life she hadn't known she wanted. The veil still covered her face, but underneath it, she was smiling. In the kitchen that morning, working side by side with Jonah, she had forgotten about her mark entirely. For whole hours now, she was just Eliza, not the marked girl, not the rejected bride, but simply a woman finding her place in an unexpected world. The red stain that had defined her for 24 years was beginning to fade, not from her skin, but from her sense of self. And in its place, something new was growing, tentative as spring grass beneath snow, but just as determined to reach for the sun. The spring market day in Sagebrush Crossing brought the whole territory to town. Ranchers drove in with winter-thin cattle. Farmers hauled early vegetables, and merchants displayed goods that had survived the winter storage. Eliza adjusted her veil nervously as she and Jonah navigated their wagon through the crowded streets. She had been working with Dr. Hoffman for 3 months now, 1 day a week helping organize his clinic and assist with basic care. The town had slowly grown accustomed to her veiled presence, though whispers still followed her movements. I'll get the supplies, Jonah said, pulling up near the general store. You go on to the clinic. I'll meet you there when you're done. As Eliza made her way along the boardwalk, she noticed a commotion near the saloon. 2 men had cornered a young woman against the wall. Rough types, clearly drunk despite the early hour. The woman, barely more than a girl, clutched a basket of eggs, her face pale with fear. Come on, sweetheart, one of the men slurred. Just one little kiss. Pretty thing like you shouldn't be so unfriendly. Please, I need to get back to my father's stall, the girl pleaded. Eliza recognized her, Mary Sullivan, daughter of a struggling farmer who sold produce at the market. Without thinking, Eliza stepped forward. "Mary, there you are. Dr. Hoffman needs those eggs urgently." She positioned herself between the girl and the men. "Excuse us, gentlemen." The taller man grabbed Eliza's arm. "Wait your turn. Lady, we ain't done here." "Yes, you are." Eliza's voice carried a authority she didn't know she possessed. "Unless you'd like me to fetch Sheriff Watson. I believe he's just around the corner." The men exchanged glances. The sheriff's presence at market day was well known, and public disturbance could mean a night in jail. "Ain't worth the trouble anyway," the shorter one muttered. They stumbled away, casting dark looks back. "Thank you," Mary whispered, tears threatening. "I didn't know what to do." "Come with me to the clinic. You can calm yourself there." As they walked, Eliza noticed other women watching from doorways and windows. Mrs. Chen gave a small nod of approval. Even Mrs. Henderson, who had so coldly rejected Eliza months ago, looked thoughtful. At the clinic, Dr. Hoffman was examining a ranch hand's infected cut. He glanced up as they entered. "Miss Hartman, perfect timing. Could you prepare a poultice and perhaps some tea for Miss Sullivan? She looks shaken." As Eliza worked, she felt Mary's eyes on her. "Miss Hartman, why do you wear that veil, if you don't mind my asking?" Eliza's hand stilled on the herb she was grinding. "I have a facial birthmark. People find it disturbing." "Oh." Mary was quiet for a moment. "My cousin in Denver has a mark like that on her neck. She covers it with high collars. Says it makes her feel safer." "Yes," Eliza agreed softly. "Safer." The clinic door burst open. Abel Rusk strode in, face flushed with anger. "Where is she?" Dr. Hoffman straightened. "Mr. Rusk, this is a medical facility. If you're not injured..." "I'm here for her." Abel pointed at Eliza. "Defending loose women in the street, causing scenes. You shame the protection Creed provides you." "I helped a young woman being harassed," Eliza replied evenly. "Something any decent person would do." "Decent?" Abel laughed harshly. "You dare speak of decency, a marked woman, living unwed with a man, flaunting yourself in town. That's enough." Jonah appeared in the doorway, his presence filling the small clinic. "You've said your piece, Rusk. Now leave." "Or what, you'll play the hero again?" Abel sneered. "I've been patient. Creed. But my patience has limits. That woman belongs to me by rights. Her father signed a contract." "Which you voided when you rejected her in front of half the town." "Doctor," Hoffman interjected. "I may be new here, but I understand contract law. Public repudiation nullifies prior agreements." Abel turned on the doctor. "Stay out of this, Sawbones. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns anyone who believes in common decency," the doctor replied calmly. "Now, as I said, this is a medical facility. Leave, or I'll have the sheriff remove you." For a tense moment, Abel looked ready to argue. Then his eyes narrowed. "This isn't over. That creature has brought nothing but disorder to our town. Mark my words, there will be consequences." After he stormed out, Mary Sullivan spoke up. "He's wrong. Miss Hartman helped me when no one else would. That's not disorder, that's courage." The girl's right. Mrs. Chen had entered unnoticed, carrying a basket of laundry for the clinic. This town could use more such disorder. That evening, as they returned to the ranch, Eliza was unusually quiet. Jonah let the silence stretch until they were home, seated by the fire with their customary evening coffee. "You did a good thing today," he said finally. "I made things worse. Abel's anger was already there. You just gave him an excuse to show it." Jonah set down his cup. "Eliza, I need to say something." She looked up, startled by his serious tone. "These months, having you here, it's changed things, changed me." He seemed to struggle with the words. "I told myself I was just offering shelter to someone in need, but that's not the whole truth anymore." Eliza's heart began to race. "Jonah!" "Let me finish. I'm not good with words like Margaret was, but I know what I feel. When you defended that girl today, when I see you working at the clinic, when you're here making this empty house a home again." He took a breath. "I don't want you to leave. Not ever." "I don't want to leave either," Eliza whispered. "Even knowing it means facing down Rusk, dealing with the town's judgment." "The town is changing, slowly, but I see it. And as for Abel," she straightened. "I'm tired of running from him. From all of them." Jonah stood and crossed to her chair. Gently, as he had that first day, he said, "Then stay. Not as my housekeeper or employee, stay as my wife, if you'll have me." Eliza's hand went to her veil. "You know what you're asking, to be married to someone like me. I'm asking to marry the woman who makes the best cornbread in the territory, who reads to me in the evenings, who stands up to bullies despite her own fears, who brought life back to this ranch and to me." His hand covered hers. "The mark on your face is just part of who you are, like your green eyes or your stubborn streak. It doesn't define you any more than my scars from breaking horses define me." Tears blurred Eliza's vision. "You've never asked to see it, not once since that first day I removed my veil." "Because it doesn't matter. You show me when you're ready, or you don't. Either way, my offer stands." With trembling fingers, Eliza unpinned her veil and let it fall. The lamplight cast shadows across her face, making the port wine stain seem to shift and change like sunset clouds. "This is what you're choosing," she said. "All of it." Jonah's weathered hand came up to cup her unmarked cheek. "I made my choice the day I offered you shelter. Everything since has just confirmed it was the right one. People will talk. They'll say you could do better. People say a lot of things. Doesn't make them true." His thumb brushed away a tear. "Will you marry me? Eliza, will you let me spend my days proving that you're not someone to hide away, but someone to cherish?" "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, I'll marry you." His kiss was gentle, careful, as if she might startle and run. But Eliza had done all the running she intended to do. She kissed him back with all the gratitude, affection, and growing love that had built up over months of quiet companionship. When they parted, both were smiling. "We should probably wait a bit," Jonah said. "Let the town gossip die down. Plan things proper." "No," Eliza surprised herself with her firmness. "No more waiting, no more hiding. If we're doing this, we're doing it honestly. I won't start our marriage by acting like we have something to be ashamed of." Pride flickered in Jonah's eyes. "Then we'll ride to town tomorrow and speak to the Reverend, though he might refuse. Then we'll find someone else, the justice of the peace, or we'll ride to the next town. I don't care where or how. Jonah, I just care that it's real and it's ours." That night, Eliza lay awake listening to the wind in the pines. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Abel's fury, the town's gossip, the Reverend's likely refusal. But for the first time since stepping off the train in Sagebrush Crossing, she wasn't afraid. She touched her face in the darkness, feeling the raised texture of the birthmark that had shaped so much of her life. Tomorrow, she would walk into town with her face uncovered, arm in arm with the man who saw her truly. It would be an act of defiance, of courage, of love. "You're not beautiful despite your mark," Jonah had said as they parted for the night. "You're beautiful, complete and whole as you are." And finally, miraculously, she was beginning to believe him. The morning they rode into Sagebrush Crossing to speak with Reverend Walsh, Eliza left her veil at home. The decision had come to her at dawn. If she was to marry Jonah honestly, she would start by being honest with herself and the world. "You're sure?" Jonah asked as they prepared to leave. "I've hidden long enough." She touched her marked cheek. Whatever happens today, I face it as myself. The ride to town seemed both endless and too short. As they entered Main Street, Eliza kept her head high, though she could feel the weight of stares. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Children pointed until their mothers pulled them away, but alongside the familiar revision, she caught glimpses of something else. Curiosity, even admiration from some quarters. Mrs. Chen stepped out of her laundry and nodded respectfully. Dr. Hoffman, emerging from his clinic, tipped his hat with a smile. Mary Sullivan, sweeping her father's store stoop, waved shyly. At the church, Reverend Walsh received them in his study with obvious reluctance. His eyes fixed on Eliza's birthmark, then darted away. Mr. Creed, Miss Hartman, how may I help you? We want to be married, Jonah stated simply. The Reverend's thin face pinched further. I see, and you come to me despite our previous conversation. You're the minister, Eliza said. It's your duty to perform marriages for your community. My duty is to uphold the sanctity of marriage. And frankly, Miss Hartman, your circumstances, he gestured vaguely. Living together unwed, your affliction, the scandal with Mr. Rusk. I cannot in good conscience. Cannot or will not, Jonah's voice carried an edge. Because there's nothing in Scripture about denying marriage to those with birthmarks. The congregation would be appalled. Mr. Rusk is a significant contributor to this church. So his money matters more than Christian duty. Eliza stood. Thank you for making your position clear. Reverend, we'll seek someone with actual principles. They found Justice of the Peace Thomas Brennan at the courthouse, a gruff former cavalry officer who'd lost an arm in the war between the states. You want to get married? He looked between them, his gaze lingering on Eliza's face with curiosity rather than disgust. Both of you of your own free will. Yes, sir, they answered together. Good enough for me, but I'll need witnesses. 2 of them. Eliza's heart sank. Who in town would stand witness to their union? We'll find them, Jonah said firmly. Outside the courthouse, they considered their options. Most of the townspeople hurried past, avoiding eye contact. Then Dr. Hoffman appeared, medical bag in hand. Heard you might need witnesses, he said casually. I have an hour before my next appointment. You do that? Eliza asked, surprised. Miss Hartman, you've been invaluable at the clinic. It would be my honor. He paused. Though you'll need one more. I'll do it. They turned to find Mrs. Chen approaching. Her usual stern expression softened. You helped Mary Sullivan when grown men walked past. You work hard, cause no trouble. She looked at Jonah. And you, Mr. Creed, you judge people by their actions, not their faces. This town needs more such marriages. Word spread quickly. By the time they returned to the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. Abel Rusk pushed to the front, face mottled with rage. This is a farce. That woman is bound by contract to me. Justice Brennan emerged from his office. Mr. Rusk, unless you have legal documents to present, I suggest you step aside. I have her father's letter, promising, which I have here. Eliza produced the letter she'd received the week before. My father writes that he considers any agreement void after your public rejection. He wishes me well in my new life. Abel snatched the letter, read it, and crumpled it in his fist. This isn't over. You think you've won, I'll make your lives miserable. No one will buy horses from you. Creed, no merchant will trade with you. You'll do nothing. A new voice cut through his tirade. Samuel Crawford, the bank president, stepped forward. Mr. Rusk, your behavior has become concerning, threatening citizens, attempting to enforce invalid contracts, bad for business. You understand. Other merchants nodded agreement. Whatever their personal feelings about Eliza's appearance, Rusk's increasingly erratic behavior was making them nervous. "You're all fools," Abel snarled. "Accepting this aberration, she'll bring curse on the whole town." "The only curse here is your hatred." "Mrs." Chen said loudly. "Go home, Mr. Rusk. You've lost." For a moment, violence flickered in Abel's eyes. Then, perhaps recognizing he was outnumbered, he stormed away, shouting threats over his shoulder. Justice Brennan cleared his throat. "Well then, shall we proceed?" The ceremony was simple, held right there on the courthouse steps. Eliza wore her good gray dress, her face bare to the world. Jonah stood beside her in his Sunday best, solid and sure. As Justice Brennan read the vows, Eliza was aware of the crowd, some supportive, others merely curious, a few clearly disapproving. "Do you, Jonah, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice carried clear and strong. "Do you, Eliza, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," she spoke firmly, meeting the eyes of anyone who looked her way. "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife." When Jonah kissed her there on the courthouse steps, in full view of half the town, Eliza heard murmurs ripple through the crowd, but she also heard something else. Scattered applause. Not much, but enough. Mary Sullivan clapped enthusiastically. "Doctor," Hoffman smiled broadly. Even some who'd shunned her before seemed thoughtful rather than hostile. As they prepared to leave, various townspeople approached. The blacksmith muttered congratulations. "Mrs." Patterson from the boarding house, not Mrs. Henderson, who maintained stony silence, offered good wishes, small gestures, but significant. "Thank you," Eliza said to Mrs. Chen and Dr. Hoffman, "for standing with us. Every change starts small." "Mrs." Chen replied philosophically. "First one person stands, then two, then more. You stood first. Miss Hart Mrs. Creed. Others will follow." The ride home felt different. Eliza was no longer the rejected bride or the hidden woman. She was Mrs. Jonah Creed, married in daylight with her face bare and her head high. "Regrets?" Jonah asked as they turned toward home. "None." She moved closer to him on the wagon seat. "You—" "Only that it took me so long to ask." He covered her hand with his. "Though I wonder what Abel will do now." "Whatever he does, we'll face it together." Eliza looked back toward town, then forward to their ranch. "I spent so many years letting fear control me, afraid of being seen, of being rejected, of being alone. But today I chose courage." "You've always had courage. You just needed a chance to show it." That evening, as they sat by their fire, no longer separated by propriety but side by side as husband and wife, Eliza reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The woman who'd arrived in Sagebrush Crossing, veiled and ashamed, seemed like a stranger now. "Do you know what I realized today?" she said, watching the flames dance. "When I stopped hiding my face, I stopped giving others power over me. Abel can rage, people can stare, but they can't make me feel ashamed unless I let them." Margaret used to say something similar. Jonah mused. "That we can't control what others think, only what we do with their opinions." She was wise. She would have liked you, would have admired what you did today. They sat quietly, comfortable in their new closeness, outside. Night settled over the ranch, peaceful and vast. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Abel's threats weren't empty, and changing a town's prejudices would take time. But tonight, they were simply two people who'd found each other across unlikely circumstances. "I have a wedding gift for you," Jonah said suddenly, producing a small, wrapped package. Inside was a hand mirror with an ornate silver handle. Eliza looked at him questioningly. "So you can see what I see," he explained. "Not the mark, the woman. Beautiful, brave, and mine. Eliza held up the mirror, seeing her reflection clearly. The birthmark was still there, would always be there. But for the first time in her life, it wasn't the first thing she noticed. Instead, she saw bright eyes, flushed cheeks, and a smile that spoke of hard-won happiness. "Thank you," she whispered, setting the mirror aside to kiss her husband. "For everything." As they retired for the night, Eliza thought about transformation. She'd come west to hide behind a false marriage. Instead, she'd found a real one, not despite her mark, but with full acceptance of it. Tomorrow she'd return to the clinic, face uncovered, to continue the work she'd begun. Some would accept her, others wouldn't, but she would no longer live in shadow. The red stain across her cheek remained unchanged, but everything else, everything that truly mattered, was finally, wonderfully different. The simple wedding ceremony took place on a clear June morning beneath the old oak tree behind the church, despite Reverend Walsh's refusal to officiate inside the church building. Justice Brennan had agreed to perform the ceremony on the church grounds, a compromise that satisfied those who wanted a religious setting. Eliza wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit and freshly cleaned. She had considered wearing her veil one last time, but decided against it. If she was beginning a new life, she would do so with her face uncovered, birthmark visible to all who attended. The gathering was small but meaningful. Dr. Hoffman stood as Jonah's witness, while Mrs. Chen stood for Eliza. Mary Sullivan had shyly offered to play her violin, and the sweet melody drifted across the morning air. Perhaps 24 people attended, those who had come to accept or at least tolerate Eliza's presence in their community. Samuel Crawford, the bank president, attended with his wife. The blacksmith brought his family. Several of Jonah's ranch hands stood at the back, hats in hand. Even Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house came, though she stood apart from the others. Notably absent were Abel Rusk and his circle of influence, including Reverend Walsh, who had made his disapproval clear by scheduling a prayer meeting at the same time as the ceremony. Justice Brennan, dignified despite his missing arm, began the service with simple words. "We gather here to witness the union of Jonah Creed and Eliza Hartman, two people who have chosen each other despite the opinions of others, who have found love where others saw only difficulty." As they exchanged vows, Eliza was acutely aware of the morning sun on her face, illuminating both her unmarked right side and the port wine stain that covered her left. She felt exposed, but not ashamed. Jonah's steady gaze never wavered, his gray eyes holding hers with unmistakable love and pride. "I, Jonah, take you, Eliza, to be my wife. I promise to honor and cherish you, to stand beside you against whatever storms may come, to see you always as you truly are, brave, kind, and beautiful." Eliza's voice trembled only slightly as she spoke her vows. "I, Eliza, take you, Jonah, to be my husband. I promise to build a life with you based on honesty and courage, to be your partner in all things, and to never again hide who I am." When Justice Brennan pronounced them husband and wife, the small crowd applauded. Mary Sullivan's violin soared into a joyful melody as Jonah kissed his bride. Neither of them noticed Abel Rusk watching from behind the church building, his face twisted with fury. The modest reception was held at the ranch. Mrs. Chen had organized several women to prepare food, transforming the usually sparse cabin into a welcoming space filled with wildflowers and the scent of fresh bread. It was during this celebration that the first sign of trouble appeared. Thomas, one of Jonah's ranch hands, pulled him aside. "Boss, something you should know. Found fence wire cut on the south pasture this morning. Lost about 20 head of cattle before we noticed." Jonah's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice low. "Rusk's doing... Can't prove it, but who else? And there's more. Sam tried to order feed in town yesterday. Every supplier suddenly has shortage problems." Eliza noticed her husband's tension and approached. "What is it?" "Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow," Jonah said, but Eliza knew him too well now to be fooled. "Abel's started his campaign, hasn't he?" Before Jonah could answer, "Doctor." Hoffman joined them, his usually cheerful face serious. "I've had 3 patients cancel appointments because they heard I stood witness at your wedding. And there are rumors that Rusk is pressuring the town council to revoke my medical license on some fabricated grounds." "This is my fault," Eliza began, but both men immediately protested. "This is Rusk's doing, not yours." "Doctor," Hoffman said firmly, "and I knew there might be consequences. I made my choice with open eyes." As the reception continued, more troubling news trickled in. The general store had received word that their credit was under review. The blacksmith mentioned that some of his regular customers had taken their business elsewhere, even Mrs. Chen reported losing several laundry accounts. Yet, despite these shadows, the celebration maintained its joy. Mrs. Crawford surprised everyone by presenting Eliza with a quilt she'd been secretly working on. "Every new bride needs good bedding," she said simply. "Welcome to married life, Mrs. Creed." As evening approached and guests began departing, old Samuel Crawford lingered. The bank president had been unusually quiet throughout the reception, and now he approached the newlyweds with a grave expression. "Rusk came to see me yesterday," he said without preamble. "Wanted to call in your loan early. Creed said he had information that would make you a poor credit risk." Jonah's hand tightened on Eliza's. The ranch operated on thin margins. An early loan call could ruin them. "And?" Jonah asked evenly. Crawford's weathered face creased in a smile. "I told him that in my 30 years of banking, you've never missed a payment. I also reminded him that threatening a bank president is poor business practice." His expression sobered. "But he won't stop there. He's got influence with suppliers, other merchants. He means to starve you out." "Then we'll find other suppliers," Eliza said with more confidence than she felt. "Other towns, if necessary." "That's the spirit." Crawford approved. "And you won't fight alone. There are more of us who've grown tired of Rusk's bullying than you might think. Give us time to organize." After the last guest departed, Eliza and Jonah sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The joy of their wedding day was tempered by the challenges they knew were coming. "I won't let him destroy what you've built here," Eliza said quietly. "If my leaving would—" "Don't." Jonah's voice was firm. "Don't even think it. We're married now, for better or worse. Rusk can cut fences and spread lies, but he can't touch what matters. The ranch matters. Your livelihood. You matter." He turned to face her. "I survived 8 years alone after Margaret died. The ranch kept going, the horses sold, life continued. But it was empty. Eliza, just existing, not living. These past months with you, I'd rather face Rusk's worst with you beside me than have all the prosperity in the world alone." Tears pricked Eliza's eyes. "When I arrived here, I thought my life was ending, rejected, humiliated, nowhere to turn. But it wasn't an ending at all." "No," Jonah agreed, pulling her close. "It was a beginning." As darkness fell, they made their rounds, checking the horses, securing the chicken coop, the simple routine of ranch life that had become precious to both of them. In the barn, they found a wedding gift they'd missed, a new bridle, beautifully crafted, with a note, "From those who remember kindness." It was unsigned, but the workmanship suggested the blacksmith's hand. "See," Jonah said, holding up the bridle. "Rusk doesn't speak for everyone." That night, as they lay together for the first time as husband and wife, Eliza traced the scars on Jonah's hands from years of working with horses. "We're both marked," she observed, "just in different ways." "Life marks everyone eventually," he replied, kissing her forehead just where the birthmark began. "It's what we do with those marks that matters." In the morning, they would face whatever challenges Abel Rusk had planned. There would be cut fences to mend, supplies to source from distant towns, allies to rally. The fight for their right to live peacefully would not be easy. But tonight, in the quiet of their cabin, none of that could touch them. They had chosen each other with full knowledge of the costs. They had spoken their vows in daylight, witnessed by those brave enough to stand with them. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would meet it together. The woman who had hidden her face in shame was gone. In her place stood Eliza Creed, wife, partner, and woman unashamed. The mark on her face remained, but its power to define her had ended. Love, it turned out, was stronger than shame, and courage more lasting than cruelty. As sleep finally took them, the last sound Eliza heard was her husband's steady breathing and the distant call of a night bird. It sounded like peace. It sounded like home. It sounded like the beginning of everything she never knew she wanted. The letter from Philadelphia arrived on a humid August morning, 2 months after the wedding. Eliza's hands trembled as she recognized her father's handwriting. She had written to inform him of her marriage, expecting either silence or condemnation. Instead, the letter contained something far worse. Asterisk daughter, asterisk it began. Asterisk Mr. Abel Rusk has contacted me with disturbing claims about your situation. He states you are living in sin, having broken a legal marriage contract. He has offered to forgive all debts and restore your good name if you return to fulfill your obligations. I have given him power of attorney to act on my behalf in this matter. Your mother is ill with shame. Do what is right. Eliza sank onto the porch steps, the letter crumpling in her fist. Jonah found her there an hour later when he came in from the morning chores. What is it? He knelt beside her, reading her distress immediately. She wordlessly handed him the letter. His face darkened as he read, Power of attorney means nothing when there's no valid contract, he said finally. We were legally married. Crawford and Justice Brennan can attest to that. You don't understand. Eliza's voice was hollow. In Philadelphia, my father is a respected man. If Abel claims I'm living in sin, if my father supports that claim, the scandal will destroy what's left of my family's reputation. My younger sister Julia is just 17, hoping to marry well. Your father chose his path when he arranged to send you to Rusk sight unseen. Jonah's voice held controlled anger. He doesn't get to destroy your life twice. That afternoon, they rode to town to consult with Justice Brennan. They found the courthouse in unusual turmoil. Abel Rusk stood in the main hall, flanked by 2 men in city suits, lawyers from Denver, by their appearance. Ah, the supposed Mrs. Creed. Abel sneered. Just in time. These gentlemen have some papers for you. One of the lawyers stepped forward. I'm Marcus Sterling, representing Mr. Rusk and Mr. Hartman of Philadelphia. We have documentation of a binding marriage contract, predating your arrangement with Mr. Creed. A contract I publicly rejected, Abel added with false regret. But upon reflection and consultation with spiritual advisors, I've decided Christian charity demands I honor my original commitment, despite the lady's deformity. Eliza felt Jonah tense beside her, but she placed a restraining hand on his arm. You rejected me in front of dozens of witnesses. You said you wouldn't have me in your house or bearing your name. Words spoken in shock. Sterling smoothly interjected. Not legally binding, whereas this contract, he produced a document, signed by your father, with your consent implied by your travel here. Implied consent isn't legal consent, Justice Brennan said, emerging from his office. And I performed the Creed's marriage myself. It's properly recorded. Recorded, perhaps, the second lawyer spoke up. But based on fraud, Miss Hartman concealed her disfigurement from Mr. Rusk. The original contract takes precedence. She concealed nothing. Doctor, Hoffman's voice came from the doorway. He entered with Mrs. Chen and several others. I've heard from witnesses that Miss Hartman wore a veil on arrival but removed it when requested. Mr. Rusk saw her face clearly before his rejection. The testimony of immigrants and radicals. Sterling dismissed. Hardly credible. Mrs. Chen stepped forward, eyes flashing. I've been American citizen for 10 years. Mr. Lawyer, my testimony is as good as yours. The argument might have escalated, but Samuel Crawford arrived with the sheriff. Gentlemen, I think we need to examine these claims properly. Sheriff Watson, I believe Mr. Brennan's marriage records should be reviewed. Already done, the sheriff said. He was a fair man, not in Rusk's pocket despite pressure. The Creed marriage is legally recorded, unless you have proof of prior marriage actually performed, not just contracted. There's no case here. Abel's face flushed. Then we'll take it to territorial court. I have influence there. Mr. Rusk. Crawford's voice carried the authority of his position. I've been patient with your disruptions to our town's business, but I've just received word that you've been using bank information to pressure my other clients. That's a federal offense. The lawyers exchanged glances. Sterling cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. Eliza stepped forward, her voice clear. We'll discuss it here, in front of witnesses, Mr. Rusk. You had your chance. You rejected me publicly and cruelly. I found a husband who values me for more than my appearance. No amount of legal maneuvering will change that. You marked witch, Abel snarled, his careful composure cracking. You've turned this whole town against me. You've turned the town against yourself. Doctor, Hoffman interjected. With your threats and vindictiveness. Abel lunged toward Eliza, but Jonah stepped between them. The lawyers grabbed their client's arms. Enough, Sterling said sharply. Mr. Rusk, we need to reconsider our position. As they hustled Abel away, he shouted over his shoulder, This isn't over, I'll see you ruined. Both of you. The crowd that had gathered began to disperse, but not before several people approached the Creeds with words of support. Even some who had previously shunned Eliza seemed troubled by Abel's behavior. That evening, as thunderclouds gathered over the mountains, Eliza and Jonah sat with Dr. Hoffman and the Crawfords, discussing the situation. He's getting desperate, Crawford observed. Bad for business. All this drama. Several merchants are reconsidering their association with him. But he won't stop, Eliza said quietly. I know his type. His pride is wounded. He'll escalate. Her words proved prophetic. 3 nights later, Eliza woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of horses screaming. The barn was on fire. The horses! Jonah was already running, Eliza close behind. The fire had started in the hayloft but hadn't yet spread to the stalls. Working together, they managed to free the terrified animals, driving them into the corrals. Neighbors, seeing the glow, arrived to help fight the flames, forming bucket brigades from the well. By dawn, the barn was gone, but the horses were safe. Sheriff Watson surveyed the scene grimly. Found lamp oil containers. This was deliberate. No one needed to say who was responsible, though proving it would be difficult. Abel had made sure to be seen at the saloon until late, establishing an alibi. We'll rebuild, Jonah said firmly, though Eliza could see the weight of the loss in his eyes. That barn had stood since his father's time. Together, she agreed, squeezing his soot-stained hand. The community's response surprised them. By noon, wagons began arriving, lumber from the sawmill, donated by the owner who'd grown tired of Rusk's bullying, tools and nails from the hardware store, men with strong backs and willing hands. Barn raising. Thomas announced, Old frontier tradition. Your neighbors help you build, knowing you'll help them in turn. Even people who had snubbed Eliza before showed up. Mrs. Henderson brought food for the workers, avoiding Eliza's eyes, but there nonetheless. Reverend Walsh didn't come, but his wife did, quietly delivering fresh bread. As the frame of the new barn rose against the sky, Eliza felt tears on her cheeks. "They're not all here for me," she told Mrs. Chen. "Some still can't look at my face, but they're here. Is beginning." Mrs. Chen said simply, "Change comes slow, like spring after hard winter, but it comes." Dr. Hoffman, taking a break from hammering, approached with the news. Rusk's lawyers left town this morning. Apparently, they discovered some irregularities in his business dealings they weren't comfortable being associated with. By evening, the barn's frame stood complete. It would take weeks to finish, but the bones were there, raised by community effort. As the helpers prepared to leave, old-timer McGurk, a prospector who rarely came to town, approached Eliza. "My grandmother had a mark like yourn," he said gruffly. "Covered her whole arm. Strongest woman I ever knew. You remind me of her." He shuffled away before she could respond. That night, as Eliza and Jonah sat on their porch, exhausted but hopeful, she reflected on the day's events. "He tried to destroy us, but he brought the town together instead. Some of them, anyway," Jonah said pragmatically. "Rusk still has supporters. This isn't over." "No," Eliza agreed. "But something changed today. When they raised those beams, they weren't just building a barn, they were choosing a side. Your side." "Our side. The side that judges by actions, not appearances. The side that builds instead of burns." As if in response to her words, a rider approached through the dusk. Thomas reined in at the porch. "Thought you should know," he said. "Rusk's packing up. Saw wagons at his house, furniture being loaded. Word is he's heading to Denver to expand his business interests." After Thomas left, Eliza and Jonah sat in stunned silence. Could it really be ending? "He'll be back," Jonah said finally. "Men like him don't give up easily." "Maybe. But today, the town stood with us. Whatever comes next, we won't face it alone." As stars emerged in the clear night sky, Eliza touched her marked cheek. The stain remained, unchanged and unchangeable, but everything around it had transformed. She was no longer the veiled stranger seeking charity. She was part of this community, woven into its fabric by crisis and kindness alike. The burned barn had become a foundation for something stronger, and Abel Rusk, in trying to destroy her, had instead revealed the true character of Sagebrush Crossing, a town struggling between old prejudices and new possibilities, slowly choosing hope over hate. The autumn rains came early that year, turning the roads to mud and making travel treacherous. It was during one such storm that Abel Rusk returned to Sagebrush Crossing, not with the fanfare of his departure, but like a thief in the night. Eliza first learned of his presence when Mary Sullivan burst into the clinic, soaked and trembling. "He's back," Mary gasped. "Mr. Rusk. He's at the saloon, talking wild. Says he's got new papers from Denver, some judge there who'll overturn your marriage." Dr. Hoffman looked up from the compress he was preparing. "Mary, slow down. What exactly did you hear?" "He's been drinking since noon, showing papers around, saying the territorial judge is his cousin. Says he'll have Mrs. Creed arrested for bigamy if she doesn't come willing." Eliza's hands stilled on the bandages she was rolling. After 2 months of peace, she'd almost allowed herself to believe the threat was over. "I'll fetch Jonah," Dr. Hoffman said, reaching for his coat. "No." Eliza stood, her spine straightening. "I won't have my husband fighting my battles anymore. If Abel wants to confront me, let him." "Eliza, be reasonable." "I've been reasonable for months, hiding, letting others defend me, hoping he'd tire of his vendetta." She removed her work apron. "It's time I faced him myself." The saloon fell silent when she entered. Abel sat at a corner table, surrounded by empty bottles and a handful of his remaining cronies. His appearance had deteriorated. His fine clothes were rumpled, his face bloated with drink and bitterness. Well, the marked bride comes calling," His words slurred slightly. Come to surrender to the inevitable. I've come to end this, Abel. Eliza remained near the door, aware of the growing crowd gathering behind her. Word traveled fast in Sagebrush Crossing. End it, he laughed harshly. It ends when you honor our contract. Look here. He waved papers unsteadily. Judge Morrison in Denver says your marriage to that horse trader is invalid. Sheriff Watson pushed through the crowd. Let me see those papers. Rusk. Abel clutched them to his chest. They're legal. My cousin knows the law. Your cousin knows you paid him, Samuel Crawford said, entering with Justice Brennan. I've had word from Denver. Judge Morrison is under investigation for taking bribes. Any rulings he's made are suspect. The color drained from Abel's face. You're lying. You're all against me because she's bewitched you. The only person bewitched here is you, Eliza said quietly. Bewitched by your own pride. You couldn't bear that a marked woman rejected your rejection, that she found happiness despite your cruelty. Happiness? Abel stood unsteadily, knocking over bottles. Living in a shack with a nobody, you could have had position, wealth. I have something better. I have respect. I have love. I have a life built on truth, not appearances. You have nothing. Abel's control shattered completely. You're a freak, a curse. That mark is God's warning to stay away. The crowd murmured angrily. Even some who still felt uncomfortable around Eliza were appalled by such viciousness. No, a clear voice spoke from the doorway. Mrs. Eleanor Walsh, the Reverend's wife, stepped forward. The mark of God isn't on her face. It's on your heart, Mr. Rusk, twisted by hate and pride. Her husband appeared behind her, looking uncomfortable. Eleanor, perhaps we should... No, Reverend, I've been silent too long. She turned to face the crowd. I've watched this town tear itself apart over a birthmark. Watched good people shun a woman who's shown nothing but grace under persecution. I'm ashamed of my silence. She walked to Eliza and took her hand. Forgive me, Mrs. Creed, and know that you'll be welcome in my home. Always. This unexpected alliance broke something in the crowd. Others began speaking up. People who'd been helped at the clinic. Ranchers who'd bought horses from Jonah and found him honest. Women who'd watched Eliza face adversity with dignity. Abel watched his support evaporate with growing panic. You fools! She's manipulated all of you, can't you see? His words cut off as Jonah entered, having been summoned from the ranch. He took in the scene with one glance, then moved to stand beside his wife. Rusk, he said calmly. You've terrorized my wife for the last time. Leave now, tonight, and don't come back. That's your only warning. You threaten me. Abel fumbled for the pistol at his hip. You dare. Several things happened at once. Sheriff Watson drew his own weapon. The crowd scattered, but it was Eliza who moved fastest, stepping in front of her husband. No more violence, she said firmly. Abel, look at yourself. Look what this obsession has brought you to. You were a successful merchant, respected if not loved. Now you're a drunk waving a gun in a saloon. Is this worth it? Am I worth destroying yourself? Abel's hand shook. For a moment, something human flickered in his eyes, perhaps a recognition of how far he'd fallen. Then the rage returned. You ruined everything. If you just stayed hidden like you were meant to, then you'd have found another target for your cruelty. Doctor, Hoffman interjected. Men like you always do. Miss Hartman's only crime was existing while imperfect. The real ugliness here isn't on her face. Drop the weapon. Rusk, Sheriff Watson commanded. Don't make this worse. For a tense moment, Abel wavered. Then, with a sound like a wounded animal, he let the gun fall. He collapsed back into his chair, suddenly looking old and broken. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he muttered. I had plans. I was building something important. You were building a monument to your own pride, Crawford said bluntly. And it's fallen down around you. Sheriff Watson collected the gun and the supposedly legal papers. "Mr. Rusk, you're under arrest for disturbing the peace and threatening citizens with a deadly weapon. You'll be my guest until the circuit judge arrives." As the sheriff led Abel away, he turned back once. His eyes found Eliza's, and for the first time there was no rage there, only a bewildered hurt, as if he truly couldn't understand how his world had crumbled. The saloon slowly emptied, people returning to their lives but carrying with them the memory of what they'd witnessed. Eliza stood with Jonah, suddenly exhausted. "You shouldn't have stepped in front of me," he said quietly. "If he'd fired..." "He wouldn't have. He's a bully, not a killer. Bullies need their victims to suffer, not die." She leaned into his solid presence. "Besides, I couldn't let him hurt you, not for my sake." "Mrs.?" Walsh approached them before they left. "Mrs. Creed, I meant what I said. You'll be welcome at the parsonage, and I'll speak to my husband about Sunday services. It's time the church remembered that all are equal in God's eyes." As they rode home through the muddy streets, Eliza reflected on the strange turn of events. "Do you think it's really over?" "With Rusk, maybe. He'll likely serve some jail time, then leave the territory. His credibility is destroyed." Jonah guided the horses around a deep puddle. "But the real change is in the town. They stood up for what was right. Some of them. More than before. Change is slow, Eliza, but it's happening." That night, as rain drummed on their new barn's roof, they sat by the fire reading the week's mail. A letter had arrived from Eliza's sister Julia in Philadelphia. Asterisk, dearest Eliza. It read, Asterisk, father showed me your letter about your marriage. He forbade me to write, but I had to tell you, I'm proud of you. You faced what I could never have been brave enough to endure. Mother is slowly accepting that you're happy. Perhaps someday, when I'm of age, I might visit this frontier that has given you such courage. Your loving sister, Julia. Eliza wiped tears from her eyes as she shared the letter with Jonah. I never thought I'd hear from her again. Family has a way of surprising us, good and bad. A knock at the door interrupted them. Thomas stood on the porch, water streaming from his hat. Sorry to bother you, but thought you should know. That fire at the old barn, Sheriff, found evidence. One of Rusk's hired hands confessed. Says Rusk paid him, but he's been eating at him ever since. He's willing to testify. After Thomas left, they absorbed this final piece of Abel's downfall. The man who'd tried to destroy them with fire would now face justice for it. It's strange, Eliza mused. I came here to hide, to disappear into a marriage that would shield me from the world. Instead, I've been more visible than ever before. Fought battles I never imagined, found strength I didn't know I had. Found a community, too. Jonah added, imperfect, struggling, but learning. That's no small thing. She touched her marked cheek, a gesture that had once been defensive but now seemed merely thoughtful. This mark brought me pain, shame, rejection, but it also brought me here, to you, to a life where I matter for more than my appearance. You always mattered, Eliza. You just needed the chance to see it. As they prepared for bed, Eliza felt a sense of completion. Not ending, life would continue with its daily challenges and small triumphs. But the chapter that began with a veiled bride stepping off a train had closed. In its place, a new story was being written, one of acceptance, community, and the courage to face the world with an uncovered face and an open heart. The barn fire that had threatened to destroy them had instead forged something stronger, like metal in a forge. Their community had been tested by flame and emerged more unified, and at the center of it stood a woman who had learned that true beauty lay not in an unmarked face, but in the courage to be seen, known, and valued for exactly who she was. 5 years had passed since the barn fire, and Sagebrush Crossing had grown into a proper town with a railway depot, a schoolhouse, and even a small hospital where Dr. Hoffman now oversaw 3 nurses, including Eliza Creed, who had become his most trusted assistant. On this particular spring morning, Eliza stood before the mirror in their bedroom, pinning her hair for the day's work. The face that looked back at her bore the same port wine birthmark, but everything else had changed. Fine lines around her eyes spoke of laughter, and her expression held a confidence that would have amazed the frightened woman who stepped off the train years ago. "You'll be late," Jonah said from the doorway, holding their morning coffee. "Emma Chen's baby is due any day. I promised to check on her before the clinic opens." She accepted the cup gratefully. Mrs. Chen's daughter had married the blacksmith's son last year, and Eliza had helped deliver 3 babies in the past month alone. The town was growing in more ways than one. As they sat for a quick breakfast, a letter arrived that would change everything. It bore the seal of the Territorial Medical Board in Helena. "What is it?" Jonah asked, seeing her expression as she read. "They're offering me a position to help establish a nursing school in Helena, train other women in medical care." Her voice held wonder and uncertainty in equal measure. "Dr. Hoffman recommended me." Jonah set down his cup carefully. "That's a great honor. It would mean leaving Sagebrush Crossing, our home, the ranch." She looked at him, torn. "I can't ask you to give up everything you've built here." "You're not asking..." "And Eliza..." He reached across the table to take her hand. "What we've built isn't in the land or the buildings. It's in us. Together." Before she could respond, urgent knocking interrupted. Young Tom Sullivan, Mary's brother, stood panting on their porch. "Mrs. Creed, come quick. There's been an accident at the mine. Cave-in. They're bringing the injured to town." The next hours blurred together in a chaos of wounded miners, makeshift operating tables, and desperate efforts to save lives. Eliza worked alongside Dr. Hoffman, her marked face uncovered and unnoticed as she cleaned wounds, set bones, and comforted the dying. It was near sunset when she finally looked up to see a crowd gathered outside the clinic. At first, she thought they were family members of the injured. Then she realized they were simply watching her work through the windows. And on their faces was something she'd never seen before, not tolerance or pity, but genuine admiration. "You saved my son," one gruff miner said as she stepped outside for air. "Didn't matter what you looked like, just mattered that you knew what to do." Others nodded agreement. These were people who had whispered about her, avoided her, some who had even supported Abel Rusk's persecution. Now they saw her differently, not as the marked woman, but as the healer who had worked tirelessly to save their own. That evening, exhausted but victorious, they had lost only 2 men when it might have been a dozen. Eliza found herself at an impromptu town gathering. The miners and their families had organized it, a celebration of survival and gratitude. "Speech," someone called out. "Let's hear from Mrs. Creed." Eliza stood slowly, aware of all eyes on her. 5 years ago, she would have fled. Now she faced them steadily. "When I arrived in Sagebrush Crossing," she began, "I thought my life was over. I had been rejected, humiliated, left with nothing but the mark on my face and the clothes in my trunk. I hid behind a veil, believing that was the only way I could exist in the world." The crowd was silent, listening intently. "But this town taught me something. Oh, not easily or quickly. We've had our struggles, our conflicts. Some of you were kind from the start. Others..." She smiled slightly. "It took more convincing. But what I learned was this. We all carry marks, some visible, like mine, others hidden inside. What matters isn't the marks we bear, but what we do despite them." She found Jonah in the crowd, his eyes warm with pride. Today, when those miners needed help, no one asked about my face. They asked if I could help save lives. That's the town we've become together. Not perfect, but learning. Not without prejudice, but willing to see past it when it matters. Old-timer McGurk called out. "What about that fancy job in Helena? You taking it?" Eliza looked at Jonah, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, I'm accepting the position, but not to leave you, to learn more, to bring knowledge back. Sagebrush Crossing will always be my home, the place that taught me to stop hiding." The applause was genuine and sustained. As people came forward to wish her well, Eliza noticed a young girl tugging at her mother's skirt, pointing at Eliza's face with the frank curiosity of childhood. "Mama, why does that lady have that red mark?" Before the embarrassed mother could shush her, Eliza knelt to the child's level. "I was born with it. Like some people are born with curly hair or green eyes, it's just part of who I am." The little girl considered this seriously, then smiled. "It looks like a sunset. Pretty." Out of the mouths of babes, Eliza thought, blinking back tears. Later that night, as she and Jonah walked home under a canopy of stars, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "Do you remember what you said when you first brought me to the ranch?" she asked. "That I needed a place for the night, just shelter from the storm." "I remember." "You gave me so much more than shelter. Jonah, you gave me a home, a purpose, a life I never imagined possible." "You gave me the same," he replied. "This ranch was just a place I existed before you came. Now it's where we've built a life together." They paused at the rise overlooking their property. The new barn stood strong against the sky. The house windows glowed with lamplight, and the garden Eliza had started was ready for spring planting. "I'll come with you to Helena." Jonah said, "Thomas can manage the ranch for a while. This is your time, Eliza. Time to take everything you've learned and teach others." "Including how to face the world without a veil?" "Especially that. Though," he added with a slight smile, "maybe start with the medical knowledge first." As they continued home, Eliza touched her marked cheek one last time, not in shame or self-consciousness, but in acknowledgement. This birthmark had shaped her life in ways she could never have imagined. It had brought pain, yes, but also unexpected gifts. Without it, she might have married Abel Rusk and lived a conventional life as a merchant's wife, hosting teas and hiding her true self behind social proprieties. Instead, she had found real love with a man who saw her truly. She had discovered her calling as a healer. She had helped transform a town's prejudices, one patient at a time. And now she would take those lessons to a wider world, teaching other women not just the art of nursing, but the courage to be themselves. "You know what I think," Eliza said as they reached their porch. "I think that little girl was right. It does look like a sunset. And sunsets, while they mark endings, also promise new dawns." Very poetic. Mrs. Creed. You should write that down for your students. Perhaps I will. Chapter 1. How to See Beauty Where Others See Only Flaws. As they entered their home, the lamplight caught the silver mirror Jonah had given her on their wedding day. Eliza glanced at her reflection and smiled. The woman looking back bore her mark proudly. No longer the bride who covered her face in shame, but a woman who had learned that true beauty comes from the courage to be seen. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they prepared for Helena. But tonight, in the home built by love and acceptance, Eliza Creed was exactly where she belonged, marked, married, and magnificently herself. The red stain across her cheek remained unchanged, as it always would. But everything it represented had transformed from a source of shame to a badge of courage. From a reason to hide to a reminder that the most beautiful faces are those that dare to show themselves to the world, complete and unashamed. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss our thoughts about Eliza's journey. If you enjoyed this tale from the American frontier, please subscribe to my channel, Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like and hit the hype button to help more people discover these stories of courage, love, and redemption in the Old West.